Joining us now, Congressman, 9th District, Virginia. Talk about Trump country. Trump carrying the 9th District in Virginia by bigger majorities than anybody ever has. Morgan Griffith. Congressman, sir, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you this morning.
Okay, so you were one of the Republican congressmen in Virginia that was supportive of Trump's ban and the way he did it. And one of the things he said is, he said, look, I said this when I ran for president. I'm not going to telegraph what I'm going to do. I'm not going to tip my hand. And so I popped this on people. So I didn't give the bad guys a week to figure out how to come in prior to my ban taking place. 100 or so people inconvenienced. Immigration, FBI not satisfied with their status. What's the big deal here?
Well, in fairness, I do think the president mishandled it from a PR standpoint. I think they should have made it clear from the get-go on Friday that this did not apply to green card folks. In reading the executive order, that's not clear, and they should have either put it in the executive order or made it clear immediately with a statement from Homeland Security that didn't apply to people who already had valid green cards. And in all fairness, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, John. I think for that 109 people, they could have looked at those 109 a little bit more carefully instead of doing a blanket. If you already had your visa in hand and you were already on your way, take a look at them. If they've got connections, turn them back because of those connections. And I think that would have made things a lot smoother in this process, because otherwise it is, as you said, exactly what the president said he was going to do, which many of us campaigned on. We need a pause in these areas that have sent out terrorists in the past. We need a pause. We need to make sure we get our vetting process right. It hasn't been right. When you take a look at the San Bernardino shooters, the wife in that case came in and was never investigated at all. She filled out the paperwork. Nobody laid eyes on her. Nobody looked her in the eye. Nobody said, we're going to put you on a polygraph to make sure that you're not trying to subvert or undermine the government of the United States or that you don't want to do harm to us. Nothing was done in that regard. They just said, okay, everything's fine, let her in. So we definitely need a pause to make sure we're getting it right. And look, if it was in fact against one religion or another, it is unconstitutional. But when you take a look at it, the largest Muslim country in the world is Indonesia. They're not on that list. Mm-hmm. And you have lots of other Muslim countries that are not on that list. So, you know, I think from a PR standpoint, the Trump administration could have handled it a little bit better. But the underlying policy is trying to protect Americans, trying to do the policies that he campaigned on that said we're going to make sure that we're vetting these refugees. We want them to come here to be safe. We want to rescue folks, whether they be Muslims or Christians or Alawites or whatever faith they may be of. We want to make sure that they're not facing genocide. Many Christians are. And the previous administration didn't do a whole lot. Now, for those folks who say this is unprecedented, we look back just a couple of weeks. The same law that was passed back in 1952 that allowed the president to do this also allowed President Obama to say to the Cubans, who may have already been on a boat headed to the shores of Miami or South Florida, we are going to revoke that policy that said that once you get your foot on the ground, we're giving you permission to be here, automatic asylum. Mm-hmm. He revoked that using this same authority. Mm-hmm. So where was all the protesting then for all those people who may have been somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico trying to get to freedom away from the Castro administration? Wasn't there. So you have to take a look at some of where it's coming from, but I do think they could have handled it better from a PR standpoint.
Okay, I will grant you that. Didn't seem like the best public, like you said, they could have handled it better just from a public relations standpoint, without a doubt. But it is exactly what he said he was going to do, and I've been saying this all morning. This is exactly what he said he was going to do, and he said he was not going to telegraph his hand or tip his hand or tell the enemy exactly what he was going to do at the time that it was going to be done, and that was one of the criticisms he had for President Obama. Okay, let's get to Trump firing yesterday. The acting attorney general, this is a political appointee, Susan Yates, basically she's a bureaucrat. She says, I'm not going to implement the president's order. I'm instructing my attorneys not to defend it. That's in violation of the president's directive. He fired her. Was that justified?
I do believe it was. Now, you get into all these arguments. There are some other things that I don't know that I would want to look at in this regard. For example, it's my understanding that some of the Department of Homeland Security employees are saying they're not going to follow court orders. You can't do that. We may disagree with the court, but we have to work it through the process. That's how a civilized government works. In a republic, the three branches have to be respected. Unfortunately, in the past, the congressional branch has not been respected by the Obama administration. I hope this administration will respect the congressional branch, the legislative branch. But we also have to respect the judicial branch. When they issue an order, then that order has to be followed. If she was being instructed, which I have not heard anybody say she was, but if she was being instructed to tell folks not to follow a court order, then she may have had some ground to stand on. But just trying to overrule the president and say, no, don't follow that order, that's not the way to handle it. If she truly thought it was unconstitutional, she should have resigned on her own and said, Mr. President, I believe this is unconstitutional, therefore I'm tendering to you my resignation. That's the honorable way to handle that. She didn't handle it honorably. She decided she was president. She was more powerful than the people of the United States. She had to go.
She had to go. Now, let's get back to I think it was 4 or 5 judges who basically gave a stay to Trump's order. Do they have that right? And how will that play out? You're a lawyer.
And I'm not an immigration lawyer, so I don't know how that's going to play out, but I will tell you they do have that right. And because there were some questions about once a visa having been granted, can you override the green card with a change in policy after the fact? Because those questions were floating around, I think the judges may have been within their rights to say, whoa, hang on a minute. Let's take a look at this and let people make the arguments. That's a proper thing for a judge to do, to say there's legitimate questions, not the underlying policy, but related to green cards and visas already issued. I think the judges probably did have something they could hang their hat on. Whether it will ultimately be correct, I don't know, but when you're trying to make an emergency decision and you've got people sitting in the airport and children separated from parents, that's part of the PR nightmare. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you I wouldn't have done the same thing as a judge and said, okay, wait a minute, I want arguments by Friday. Let's get this thing on the fast track. But, yeah, I'm going to grant the stay temporarily. Okay,
so they have a temporary stay. So, Congressman Morgan Griffith, 9th District, Republican, Virginia. So what you're saying is that those in Homeland Security that says, no, we're going to defy that order from that judge, you're criticizing that and saying they don't have a right to do that, just like the acting attorney general didn't have a right to defy Trump's order. Is that what I'm understanding, sir?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Because if everybody defies everybody, you've got chaos, right?
You've got chaos and anarchy, and the government falls. You got
to follow the rules. Okay, Congressman, tonight 8 p.m. Donald Trump going to name his Supreme Court justice. Now you know that it's going to be one of the 20 people on the list, right? No question. Second thing, you know that at 8:35 there's going to be protests, no matter who it is, over and over again. What's the deal?
Well, what we have is a situation where the left has decided there's going to be no honeymoon. They don't respect the rules of the republic, and they have decided that they're going to be disruptive on anything that this president does, which is why it's so important that the president makes sure he dots his I's and crosses his T's. When I say the president, I mean the team, to not leave themselves open to criticism that's legitimate. And so they've got to make sure they're doing everything right. But it doesn't matter what he does, he's going to get criticized, so he can't be afraid of being criticized either. And so he's just got to go forward, and hopefully the Senate will put this on a fast track, because the sooner we get this thing done, the sooner we can move forward. And what the left wants to do, and they're spending a lot of money organizing and encouraging, and not all these people are paid, but they're encouraged on social media and otherwise to go. Buses are being provided to go protest wherever. And so, we're going to face that. The sooner the Senate will move some of these nominations through, follow proper order, but you can do it in a faster fashion than the left would like. But that's what happens when you have a majority. If you're using the power of the majority properly, you get it done, you get the controversy over with, and you let the country go on with its business. And it's very important, I think, that the Senate get this done quickly.
Well, Senator Mitch McConnell, Majority Leader, has already said that he's not going to change the 60-vote cloture rule, although I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him because, look, they're not going to get to 60, all right? They're just not. If you look at the protests and how the Democrats have dug in their heels, they're never going to get to 60, which means that in perpetuity, we could only have 8 judges because they'll never get to 60. Don't you think the pressure on McConnell is going to be intense in order to get rid of that man-made rule?
I do. And I think he's got to get rid of it. And the sooner he realizes that, the better off the country will be.
Agreed.
Not just on judicial selection, but certainly for judicial selection. The Democrats used it. They blew up and used what was called the nuclear option. I think it's bad. The rule's bad for the Republic. We've done shows on that before. Anyway, but certainly with regard to the Supreme Court nominee, they need to get rid of the 60-vote rule and move forward.
Okay, I'm going to play you a clip from yesterday. Connecticut Senator, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, explaining why he feels the country is going to be less safe.
I suggested before that a lot of people think what the president did makes the country less safe. Could you just tick off the ways you think this long-term, short-term makes America less safe rather than more safe?
So I think this is the most important argument for us to be making, because right now we have ISIS on its heels, and their rationale for existence is based on a belief that they are going to control a territory in the Middle East that is no longer available to them as an argument, but secondarily that there is a war between Muslim and Christian peoples, between East and West, and we have now handed them a path to rebirth. This is going to be all over the dark web, recruiting both international terrorists and lone wolves here at home. And then in Iran specifically, a country that is right now tilting between hardliners and moderates who want to engage with the West, this is a huge win for hardliners. This makes Rouhani's job even more difficult. And if you're really worried about a conflagration between the United States and Iran, this makes it much more likely. So this ultimately is going to get Americans killed. I believe it. And we can make the moral argument. I think that's important. But the national security argument probably should lead here.
So this is a Democratic senator, one of your former colleagues in the House, Chris Murphy, now a junior Democratic senator from the state of Connecticut, basically saying that extreme vetting is going to make us less safe. He went on in this interview to say that, well, we should let anybody in that wants to come in, no vetting, but then they shouldn't get an assault weapon. I mean, is this really, Congressman Griffith, the Democrats' position now? Let anybody in, and then they can't buy an assault weapon? What are they talking about here?
Well, it's really hard to tell. I heard the clip earlier on your show, and I don't get it. I thought, seriously, let everybody in, and then we'll take a look at them, but we won't let them get assault weapons. Exactly what is an assault weapon? I know they can define it in some ways, but I watched in court one day a case where one party took an aquarium and hit the other party over the head and cut them up pretty bad because the aquarium broke. Is that an assault weapon? I mean, are you serious? What we need to do is keep the people from coming in who want to harm the United States and harm the citizens of the United States.
How about the trucks? What are you going to do? Ban trucks?
Ban trucks? I mean, good point. That's even better than my aquarium. I should have thought of that. I mean, the bottom line is that if people come here and they want to harm the United States, they're going to try to figure it out. They're going to find a way to harm the United States, whether it's poisoning the water supply or running a truck into a crowd in New York City, or, doing whatever. We cannot stop them once they're here. What we can do is make sure that we're vetting them and not letting them in. And let me tell you something. ISIS is going to use anything we do to go out and recruit. They're going to make this claim, and unfortunately the left is playing right into it. They're going to make this claim that this is a war against the Muslim faith. It is not. It is a war against the radical Muslims who want to kill us, who want to destroy the United States of America. It's not your average, everyday Muslim. It is a radicalized group. They've hijacked mainstream Muslim faith. That's why you don't see every Muslim country on the list, because in many countries, while this radical element exists, it's not prevalent, but there's some countries where it's very prevalent. And, let everybody in? Seriously? I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. And look, we can cry that there is peace, but there is no peace, in the words of the famous Virginian. And so we have to be prepared to recognize that while we want peace, we can't just roll over and pretend that there's going to be peace because we want it to happen. We have to take actions to protect the people of the United States of America.
You know what, Congressman, mark my words, Congressman Morgan Griffith, this statement by Chris Murphy is going to lead to a very long-time permanent majority for Republicans in the Senate and the House, because this really represents the view of the Democratic Party right now, which is open borders, let anybody in, it doesn't matter. And the real issue is don't sell them an assault weapon. I mean, it is such an absurd argument. I think average people are just going to shake their head and say, you know what, I've just had it with that. I want change. And I think you're going to win a bigger majority in 2018 in those midterms, including your own reelection. I'm out of time. More information, go to morgangriffithforcongress.com, or you can go to griffith.house.gov. Okay, Congressman, final word. What do you have?
Well, I think folks just need to, be ready. There are going to be lots of demonstrations, lots of protests. We just have to adapt to the new world. And people need to, if they disagree with those protesters, they need to write letters. They need to call their congressman as well. That's what these folks are being told to do. And say, wait a minute, we're backing you up. The DCCC has already come out with its target list. Scott Taylor is on there. From what I can see so far, he's doing a fine job. People need to be supportive of those who support them, whether it be Democrats or Republicans. It's mostly going to be Republicans, but whether it be Democrats or Republicans, people need to understand that we have to protect the interests of the United States of America, and it's high time we stop kowtowing to our enemies.
All right, that's going to be it. We want to thank Congressman, 9th District Republican Morgan Griffith for being with us. Want more information? morgangriffithforcongress.com. Great new website. Sir, thanks for being with us. Keep it right here.